please pray with me. May these words that I speak be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the God presence in me, and may these words that you hear be captured by your soul, enlivened by the God presence in you. Amen. Change is difficult for most of us. And I have noticed that even folks who claim they like change will have some area or other in their life where they don't like change at all. The problem is, of course, that change is inevitable. Because in an evolutionary universe, nothing ever stays the same. The fact that it happens is precisely why we resist it so strongly. And it seems to me that the church is one of those places that is most resistant to change. Maybe you've noticed that. Maybe you've participated in that. It's resistant to change as we try to hold on to something that for many is almost equivalent to a security blanket. But all we end up doing, I believe, is postponing the change which will come eventually, making our experience in the present more anxious than it probably needs to be. Now, this may seem like an odd beginning to Lent, where there is a tendency to return to a spiritual journey that we all know well and have done before. But I hope you will stay with me, because I am convinced that change, with all the fear and uncertainty that it brings, is at the very heart of our journey to Jerusalem. One I am calling this year, Roots and Wings. I have been reading our moderator, Gary Patterson's blog each week, and coincidentally this week it was about change. He was meeting with the task group. The task group. This is the group that was elected at General Council last summer to do something about the challenges facing the church. And task groups are not new in that sense, but this one seems to have a bit more purpose to it. And so he was meeting this week with this task group, and this is some of what he had to say in his blog. So, last week, another 2 days of task group meeting, working away at how to engage the challenges facing our church and eventually bring in recommendations for change. Lots of discussion and a couple of things I'd like to share. And then he goes on to talk about the fact that at this particular meeting they met with a change consultant. It's one of the new things that we're doing in this culture, is a change consultant, because change is happening at such a rapid pace that people are becoming completely and utterly overwhelmed, and change consultants go into corporations and organizations to help them cope with the rate of change. And so they met with a change consultant, and he suggested, or she suggested, I don't even know whether this was a man or a woman, the consultant suggested that we needed to do two things primarily. The first, to establish the urgency for change, the threat or burning platform. And that metaphor, it comes from a real-life incident in the North Sea oil industry. If you stay on the platform, which is in flames after an explosion, you fry. If you jump into the ocean, you have maybe 20 minutes before you freeze. So you choose possible rescue instead of certain death. That's the burning platform metaphor. How to convince our church that we've now hit the point where we simply must change, that maintaining the status quo is certain death. We know we're in trouble, but I'm not sure we're convinced that we have to jump. We have had in the past a habit of always punting our concerns back to the next General Council. Second, offer a compelling vision. We can do better. There is a different way of doing things. See, it looks something like this. We need to lead, to offer a dream of far distant shores and invite people to raise their sights. To raise their sights. Then, to a lesser degree, he says, we need to manage, to point out practical management concerns, if only to indicate that we know what we're talking about. Our essential task is the dream, the vision. But we've noticed that in past general councils, and general councils, for those of you who may not know, it's the meeting of the whole church nationally, that like representatives from across the country that meet every 3 years to make the big decisions. We've noticed that in past general councils, people appear to want all the details spelled out and nailed down. How much will be enough? And then he says there's another question. Is it better to lead with the threat or the bad news? Unless people really get the total urgency of it all, nothing will change? Or is it better to lead with vision and hope, that people are inspired and see the possibilities? This sounds like a familiar conundrum. Afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And Gary goes on to say, I was reminded of a theory of change that I came across some years ago, and it's this. MC, motivation for change, equals FP, felt pain, times FV, felt vision, times FS, first steps. So the motivation for change is the pain times the vision times the steps. And he said if any one of the items on the right-hand side of the equation is 0, then the left side, the motivation for change, is automatically 0. And if you know your math, you know that's true. If the pain is 10 and the vision is 10 and the first steps are 0, 10 times 10 is 100 times 0 is 0. So all three need to be in that equation. He finishes by saying, So, burning platform and vision and a plan. I know that I find it easier to jump when I have some idea of where. I find the idea of jumping from a burning platform intriguing, but what alarms me somewhat is the need to know exactly where we are jumping to. This suggests to me a need for control, for planned change, for order that appears to lack a trust in God to guide us to the promised land. For me, everything belongs to God, because God is the heart of everything. And because everything belongs to God, we need to learn to let go, to lose control, to allow the God Spirit to hold us and move us to whatever and wherever we need to be. It is this notion that everything belongs to God that causes Moses to say to the Israelites that they need to give back from their bounty because none of it actually belongs to them personally or collectively anyway. It is gift from the heart of God, and it is intended to be shared. Abram, at 75 years old, in our first reading this morning, pitches his tent, hardly a permanent structure. The only permanent structure that he erects is an altar to God. An altar in order to give thanks. And he does that at every step of the journey. Abram realizes that all creation, even life itself, is gift, which we need to be thankful for. It is the Spirit of God in Abram that compels him to the journey. And he has no idea where he's going to end up. He is not driven by any need to be in control and is open to whatever change may come because he knows that God is there. And he knows that he belongs to God. And the story of Jesus' temptation in the gospel today is, for me, a reaffirmation of the story of Abram. It is the classic internal battle that each of us face between feeding our ego for personal gain and feeding our soul for life-giving relationship. I'm reminded of another classic line. What does it profit one to gain the world and lose your soul? Conflict, both in ourself and in our connection with the world, comes when we lose sight of the simple reality that everything belongs to God. We become defensive, selfish, controlling, and greedy, rather than open, giving, conciliatory, and compassionate. Though this will be different for every one of us, this Lenten journey is a journey back to God and to living into the notion that God is at the heart of all we are and all that we do. As for this church community, I believe that this all belongs to God as well. It's not ours. Church works best when God is at the center of all that we are and all that we do. It doesn't work so well when we become motivated and make decisions to meet our own needs. The journey to God-centered lives and God-centered community brings a transformative nature that, as I said last week, will transfigure us, that will make us glow with the power of the Spirit of God in our lives. This is the kind of change that really matters. This change is what I call the roots and wings of our journey, both individually and as a church community. We all have deep roots. I could hear and I could see the resonance in holy, holy, holy this morning. Our roots are deep. We have roots in friend and family. We have roots in our faith life. We have roots in values that we hold close. We have roots in this gift of love, just to name a few. And we also have roots of resistance, indifference, and control, to name a few others. Roots are the things that must ground us and connect us and that give life meaning. And so it is important to take inventory and to know as clearly as we can what roots are important and what roots need to be pruned back a little. Because roots can be both life-giving and life-taking. And at the same time, we all have wings. Curiosity, compassion, openness, adventure, as well as carelessness and indulgence. To name just a few again. Wings are the things that need to encourage vision, to bring change, and to give life meaning. So once again, it is important to take inventory to know what wings make us soar and what wings need to be clipped a little. And what we find both individually and as a community is that there is a constant tension between our roots and our wings. We need to be firmly grounded, rooted in all that is life-giving, and at the same time be willing to soar on the Spirit of God, winged flight on this uncertain journey. If you can just imagine that, our feet cemented into the earth, and our wings stretching us to move to something else. That is the tension that we face. And change is always part of that tension. And we are called to trust that it will be okay. And I believe that it is healthy roots and fully spread wings that will make us the radiant community that I dream of. You see, my friends, this church community is going to change whether we like it or not. It's whether we choose to participate that is the difference. The prognosis isn't good for any church community in its present form, and we are not immune to that. Our moderator asked, is it better to lead with the pain of bad news to frighten people into change, or is it better to lead with vision and hope so that people are inspired into change? The reality is that fear is already before us. It's already in our minds and hearts. But fear alone will not help us to become an even more radiant community than we are presently. A vision will. It was a vision that made Abram and the Hebrew people radiant. It was a vision that made Moses and the Israelites radiant. It was a vision that made Jesus and his followers and the early church radiant. And I believe it is a vision that will change us all into all that God is calling us to be. A vision of a community with deep roots and broad wings. A community of compassion with clear, life-giving values. A community where every single one is honored and every single one is encouraged to be the best that we can be. And I know this can happen, my friends. I know this because everyone and everything belongs to God.